Namaste children, welcome back again to this virtual class. So in today's episode we will be beginning a new chapter, that is our environment. You are much familiar with the environment, you must have studied in the lower classes also about environment, right? So the places which are there in and around us, what we call environment, and about various factors and various effects on the environment is continuously being talked about in television, newspaper and various other media. So knowing about environment is very important, right? In the lower classes you must have studied about some biogeo cycles. For example, nitrogen cycle is there, carbon cycle, oxygen cycle. So all these are some of the most important cycles which is very important for living organisms, right? So carbon is one of the most important element, nitrogen is another important element. Likewise, various other elements are cycled in the environment for making the survival of living organisms possible. So when we talk about environment, then in the environment we see lot of living organisms and also non-living things exist, and the biogeochemical cycles are also exist in the environment. So these biogeochemical cycles facilitate the existence or sustenance of life on the earth. So when we talk about the environment, there the interaction of living organisms with the non-living organisms continuously take place in a particular place, and due to this interaction we could see reproduction, food, habitat, all these things are taking place in an environment. And this interaction between the living organisms with the non-living objects, we call it as ecosystem. Let us take an example. Forest is one of the natural ecosystem where we see lot of living organisms, plants exist, insects, birds, animals, all those things exist in the forest, and they interact with the non-living objects such as the sunlight is there, water is there, air. So continuous interaction between the living organisms and the non-living things in a particular place. So we can say that forest is an ecosystem, and forest is naturally made, so we call it as a natural ecosystem. Likewise, the pond is another natural ecosystem where aquatic life forms are there and other non-living things are also exist, and the interaction takes place continuously for their existence, for sustenance of their life forms, right? So this is all about an ecosystem. Apart from the natural ecosystem, we also see various artificial ecosystem. For example, garden. In a garden we see lot of living organisms, it may be plants, animals and insects, all those things we see, and they interact continuously with the non-living objects for sustenance of life. So here garden is an artificial ecosystem, and in our home also we see aquarium, right? So in aquarium we see the fishes and other microorganisms also exist in the aquarium. So aquarium is an example of a simple ecosystem, right? So this is about ecosystem. When we talk about ecosystem, then ecosystem comprises of two factors. One is called biotic factor and another one is abiotic factor. Biotic factors are those factors which comprise of the living organisms, and abiotic factors are the non-living things such as air, water, soil and other sunlight. All these are abiotic factors. So in an ecosystem, continuous interaction of the biotic factors with the abiotic factor take place for their existence, for their reproduction, for their food, for their habitat. So this is all about an ecosystem. Dear students, you are very much familiar with the living organisms. When we talk about living organisms, they are broadly classified into three categories. They are producers, consumers and decomposers. So when we talk about the living organism, we should understand what is a producer, what is a consumer and what is a decomposer. Producers are those organisms which produce their own food. We know that autotrophs, that is all the green plants, prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis by making use of simple non-living objects such as sunlight, water, air. They produce their own food. They never depend on any other organism. Such organisms which prepare their own food. We know that it is called autotrophs, and such organisms are classified under producer. Secondly, consumers. Consumers are also known as heterotrophs. About heterotrophs, you must have studied in the first chapter of biology of your class 10 science. That is the organisms which depend directly or indirectly for food on different organisms. We call it as heterotrophs, right? So heterotrophs are the consumers. Consumers are again classified into different categories. They are herbivores, they are carnivores and omnivores. Herbivores are those organisms which feed only on green plants. We call it as herbivores. Goat, cow, all these are the examples of herbivores. Secondly, carnivores. Carnivores are those organisms which feed on meat, only on meat. Such type of organisms are called carnivores. For example, lion is there, cheetah is there, all these are examples of carnivores. The third type of consumer is omnivores. Omnivores are those organisms which feed both on green plants and the animals. We and dog is there. All these are the examples of omnivores. So when we talk about consumers, consumers are herbivores, carnivores and omnivores, right? Now talk about the third category, that is decomposers. Now, have you ever thought of what will happen if the living organisms, whether it is a plant or the animals, die? Once the living organisms die, the microorganisms feed on those dead and decayed matter, and ultimately those complex molecules are split into simpler one. Once again, the splitted or the simpler molecule decomposed by the microorganisms are once again taken up by the plants. So such an organism which decomposes the dead organisms, whether it is a plant or animal, is known as a decomposer. So the living organisms are classified into different categories. One is, we call it as producers, second one is consumers, and third one is decomposers. So in an ecosystem, existence of producers, consumers and decomposers are very important. Whatever the ecosystem, we see all these category of living organisms, they continuously interact on the non-living factors that exist on the ecosystem. Let us understand food chain. In order to understand food chain, let us take an example here. The green plant, which we have already discussed, this is the producer, and the remaining all other organisms are consumers, which feed on the green plants directly or indirectly. So followed by the green plants, you can see grasshopper. Then grasshopper is consumed by the frog, and the frog is consumed by the snake, and the snake is eaten away by eagle. Now here you see one organism depends on other organism, right? So this is what we call it as food chain. So here at each level you can see another organism is depend on the next organism. So the whole chain here, as you see, for food each organism depends on other. Ultimately you can see a chain of living organism. This we call it as food chain. Here in this diagram, each step or the level in the food chain forms a trophic level. So here you can see the energy transformation takes place one level to the another, and this way it goes on. And you know that the green plants are the producers, so the primary energy consumption or production is by the green plants. So from the sunlight and other non-living, simple non-living things, the green plants, so called the producers, prepare their food. So it is assumed that 1% of sun's energy is utilized for making energy. Once the green plant is consumed by the grasshopper, which falls in the second trophic level, the energy is transformed from the green plant to the grasshopper. It is assumed that for various activities, the energy which is being consumed from the green plants is utilized. Only 10% of the energy is remain, which can be transformed for the next trophic level. So the grasshopper to, if you see the energy transformation from grasshopper to frog, only 10% of the energy what the grasshopper utilized or taken from the green plants is available for the next trophic level. So this way at each trophic level you can see only 10% of the total energy what it has consumed from the previous trophic level will be passed on to the next trophic level. So in this diagram you can see the total energy is transformed up to the first trophic level. From there only 10% of the energy is available for transformation to the next trophic level. Ultimately if you see in the fourth level, that is eagle falls on the top level of the trophic level, there only very less amount of energy is being transformed. So because as the trophic level goes on increasing, then the energy transformation is also less. So in a food chain mostly we see 3 or 4 trophic levels. If you go beyond 4th trophic level, then the energy transformed to the 5th or 6th energy level will be almost be negligible. So we see in a food chain at most 4 trophic level, beyond that we don't find. Now look at the diagram which shows various trophic levels. In all the cases in the diagram you can see different trophic levels. The first trophic level comprises of producers in all the cases. See, in the first trophic level it is the producers. All the green plants come under the producers. Secondly, you see the primary consumers. Under primary consumers you will find herbivores. So here in this case grasshoppers, deer, goat, cow, all these are the primary consumers which directly feed on the producers, that is green plants. When we move above, then you will see the secondary consumers. Here the secondary consumers are the consumers which consumes on the herbivores. Primary carnivores come under the secondary consumers, and when you go above, then one more type of consumers you will find, that is tertiary consumers. Here tertiary consumers are also known as top level carnivores. Lion, cheetah, tiger, all are the top level carnivores, beyond which the trophic level could not be possible. So this is how the trophic level goes in an ecosystem. Since we have learned that only 10% of the organic matter is available to be transferred to the next trophic level, that is for the next consumer. Since so little energy is available for the next level of consumers, food chains generally consist of only 3 or 4 steps. Beyond that it is not possible. This is because the loss of energy at each step is so great that very little usable energy remains after 4 trophic levels. So beyond that, if trophic level goes, then the organisms which goes beyond will get very less amount of energy, which is not sufficient for their survival. So only we do not see trophic levels beyond 4. If you look at the ecosystem in a broader way, then you will find more and more food chains, as you can see on the diagram, a simple diagram in which you can see 3 different types of food chains. Now look at the picture. Here you can see interlinking of more than one food chain in an ecosystem, right? So such an ecosystem where more and more complex food chains are available, such a complex food chain is known as food web. So we can say that in a food web we can find more and more food chains. In a food web, there are generally a greater number of individuals at the lower trophic levels of an ecosystem. The greater number is of the producers. So in the diagram you can see producers are more in number as compared to any other trophic level. Followed by the producers, you will find herbivores are more in number, then followed by herbivores you will find carnivores, and top carnivores are very less in number. Since when you go above, that is producer to herbivores, herbivores to carnivores, and carnivores to top carnivores, very less amount of energy is available. Hence organisms are also less in number in higher trophic levels. Let us have a look at the flow of energy in an ecosystem. So from this it is very much clear that the source of energy for all the living organism is sunlight. So producers make food with the help of sunlight. From the producers, the energy is transferred to herbivores. From the herbivores, it goes to carnivores, and from the carnivores, it goes top carnivores. So from the energy flow diagram, two things become very clear. Firstly, the flow of energy is unidirectional, which means the energy that is captured by the autotrophs does not revert back to the solar input, and the energy which is passed to the herbivores does not come back to the autotrophs. Similarly, the energy which is obtained from the herbivores by the carnivores will not be reverted back. As it moves progressively through the various trophic levels, it is no longer available to the previous level. So we can say that the energy transformation across the various trophic levels is unidirectional. Another interesting aspect of food chain is how unknowingly some harmful chemicals enter our bodies through the food chain. The same thing you must have studied in the lower classes, that is in class 9. One of the reason is the use of several pesticides and other chemicals to protect our crops from diseases and pests. These chemicals are either washed down into the soil or into the water bodies. From the soil, these are absorbed by the plants along with water and minerals. And from the water bodies, these are taken up by aquatic plants and animals. This is one of the ways in which they enter the food chain. As these chemicals are not degradable, these get accumulated progressively at each trophic level. This way, the chemicals get transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level. As human beings occupy the top level in any food chain, the maximum concentration of these chemicals get accumulated in our body. This phenomena of accumulating harmful substances which gets enter from one trophic level to other is known as biological magnification. This is the reason why our food grains such as wheat and rice, vegetables and fruits and even meat contain varying amounts of pesticide residues. They cannot always be removed by washing or other means. This is because they get into the food materials through various trophic levels. Dear students, you are much clear about the biogeochemical cycles which you have studied in class 9th, right? So all these biogeochemical cycles are very important for the sustenance of life on the earth. So carbon cycle we have studied, oxygen cycle, nitrogen cycle, all these are very important. But due to human activities in one or another way, these cycles get affected to a large extent. Let us understand and find out the reason or what are the various ways by which these cycles got affected. Now dear students, we know that in our day-to-day activities we produce lot of waste materials, right? When these materials are produced in our home, ultimately they reach into the garbage and we release into the atmosphere. When they are released into the atmosphere, in the atmosphere we find ecosystem. Ultimately they affect the ecosystem. Dear students, in the life processes we studied that enzymes are specific in action. So a particular type of enzyme digests a particular type of food materials. If some other food materials enter into our body, they are not get digested, they are just come out of the body undigested, right? Likewise, in the environment also decomposers are available. If the waste materials generated in our home are released into the atmosphere or in the ecosystem, some of the waste materials are decomposed since the decomposers are available. But there are waste materials, we call it as a non-biodegradable substances, are not decomposed by microorganisms, right? So the waste materials which are biodegradable, which means which can be decomposed by microorganisms, are decomposed and they do not cause any harm to the environment, they do not cause any harm to the ecosystem. But the non-biodegradable waste such as polythene, plastics are the waste which cannot be decomposed by microorganisms, right? So when such type of wastes are released into the ecosystem, then they remain suspended or they remain in the ecosystem or in the environment for millions and millions of years, causing various types of pollution. If they are buried into the earth, they cause soil pollution or land pollution. If they are burnt, they cause air pollution. If they are littered or released into the water, they cause water pollution. So in all the way, these non-biodegradable substances cause pollution, right? So these substances adversely affect the ecosystem, thereby causing impact on the sustenance of life on the earth. And also in 9th standard you must have studied about biomagnification, right? Excess use of fertilizers. During rain, what happens, these fertilizers are washed away, and when they go into the water body, the plants and the algae which live on the water body, they grow and they create demand in oxygen for the aquatic organisms or the aquatic animals such as fishes. This causes algal bloom. One of the most important effect caused by human being on the environment is ozone layer depletion. You know that ozone, you must have studied in the lower classes, is a triatomic oxygen molecule, that is O3. And you know the ozone layer is the third layer of the atmosphere, that is the stratosphere, right? So ozone layer protects the reach of, or the ozone layer filters the harmful radiation that comes from the sun up to the earth. Ozone layer acts as a blanket and which prevents the entry of harmful radiation such as ultraviolet radiation to the earth. In recent times, the study shows that due to human activities, the ozone layers in the stratosphere gets depleting continuously, and the main reason for the depletion of ozone layer is use of chlorofluorocarbon. Due to human activities, the amount of ozone available in the stratosphere goes on dropping, and due to this, the density of ozone in the ozone layer gets diminishing. As a result of this, more and more ultraviolet radiations may reach into the Earth's surface and cause adverse effects. It is clear that the third layer of the atmosphere is what we call the stratosphere, right? Stratosphere. And this stratosphere is full of triatomic oxygen molecule, we call it as ozone. And the main function of this ozone, which we have discussed, is it protects the earth's surface from reach of harmful gases or harmful radiation such as ultraviolet radiation. So ultraviolet radiation, you know the impact of ultraviolet radiation. When it reaches the earth, if it strikes over the surface of the skin, then it causes a skin cancer and plants wilting and other diseases. So ultraviolet radiation is one of the harmful radiation which should be protected. So ozone serves the purpose, and you should know ozone is a poisonous gas. Thank God it's not there on the surface of the earth where we live, and it is the lightest gas, so it is present in the stratosphere. Let us see how the human activities contribute for the depletion of ozone layer. First one is release of chlorofluorocarbon. So students, you should know what is chlorofluorocarbon. Chlorofluorocarbon is one of the chemical substance used in various places. Let us see what are the various places. First one is, it is used as aerosol, then refrigerator. In refrigerator, tube lights also contribute, tube lights. In examination also, such type of questions asked, why should we avoid use of tube lights? Because tube lights emit chlorofluorocarbon, right? So as far as possible, we should avoid use of tube lights. So these are the various substances which releases chlorofluorocarbon. Now what happens if chlorofluorocarbon is released? We know that the formula of ozone is O3. When chlorofluorocarbon is released, that is chlorofluorocarbon, when chlorofluorocarbon reacts with the ozone molecule, then it is converted into O2. So upon balancing this, we will get like this, right? So here you see ozone molecules are continuously being converted into oxygen, that is diatomic oxygen molecule which we use for a respiration process. So this way, when chlorofluorocarbon, here in chlorofluorocarbon, chlorine is one of the active element which is capable of splitting ozone molecule into oxygen. Here the chlorofluorocarbon is capable of splitting ozone molecule into diatomic oxygen molecule, and this way more and more chlorofluorocarbon which when released into the atmosphere, then more ozone molecules will be splitted. This way the density of ozone molecule in the stratosphere will be reduced. So finally, if the thickness reduced to maximum extent, then more ultraviolet radiation is allowed to pass through. If they are passed, then it reaches, the ultraviolet radiations can reach up to the earth's surface very easily. So at this point we call it as hole in the ozone layer. So this is the main cause of ozone layer depletion. So the ozone layer depletion can be avoided by reducing the use of ODS, that is ozone depleting substance. Basically the ozone depleting substances are the chlorofluorocarbon which we have discussed before, right? So in short we call it as ODS. Use of ODS should be minimized in order to prevent the ozone layer depletion. Here whatever the causes we have seen for the ozone layer depletion, all are due to the human activity. Aerosol, refrigerator, tube light, all are the activities done by human beings. So if we are able to reduce the use of all those things, then we can prevent the ozone layer depletion. So we learned that due to improper disposal of waste generated in our home and other places, it causes harmful effects or creates impact on the environment, which ultimately affects the sustenance of life on the earth. So we need to be cautious in disposing the wastes into the atmosphere. Proper disposal of the waste creates a good environment and a healthy environment which facilitates proper growth or proper survival of living organisms in the green earth. So dear students, that's all we have in this chapter. So with this I would like to conclude today's session. Before concluding, let me give you some easy home assignments which you can practice at home. So here is your home assignment. Hope you will do all these home assignments very easily. See you all on another day with a new interesting topic. Till then, keep learning, take good care of yourself. Bye.